All right. What are macros and how do they fit into a runner's diet? We are talking about the basics of nutrition for running on this 119th episode of the Healthy Runner podcast, where we help you get stronger, run faster, and become a lifelong injury-free runner. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. And today I have the expert when it comes to running nutrition with me here to discuss how carbohydrates, proteins, and fats play an integral role in your body and your running performance. Thank you for taking the time to come back on the show today, Brooke.
Yes, thanks for having me. Third time's a charm.
Indeed, it is. Third time Brooke is on the show. So for those of you that don't know Brooke Czarnecki, she is our resident Healthy Runner registered dietitian, nutritionist, who provides some serious value in our Healthy Runner Facebook group, our coaching client community, and has created a module within our one-on-one Healthy Runner coaching program that really breaks down nutrition for runners, that is now required viewings for all of our athletes who are in our program. So she has previously provided some amazing content, as she kind of mentioned in two previous podcast episodes. So in episode 87, she shared some great information on underfueling and REDS, or relative energy deficiency in sport, and how it can actually affect your running performance, as well as shared some great content for middle-aged mom runners and how they can fuel and feel better during their runs, either pre or post menopausal. So if you missed that, check that out. And then also, last time she was on the show was to kick off the new year, and we really talked about 4 running nutrition habits anyone can do. So check that episode out as well. If you missed that, that was episode 107. So in this episode, Brooke is going to cover Nutrition 101 for runners and answer some common questions. She's going to be talking about kind of what the difference between macronutrients and micronutrients are. What are the components of the food that we eat? What carbs should runners have? And really, what's the difference between a complex carb and a simple carb, and how we use them for running? And then what are the different types of proteins that are available for us? And then what fats are healthy for runners to consume? So this is going to be the foundation, honestly, the building blocks, especially if you're new to running. This is going to be especially important for you. But honestly, even if you've been running for a while and you haven't dialed in your nutrition, it all goes back to your foundation and your basics, right? So this is going to be super helpful for you. So let's get started with our little dynamic warm up, Brooke. For those that are new to the podcast or within our community, tell them, where you're from and what do you do?
Yes, so my name is Brooke Czarnecki. I'm a registered dietitian, and I am from Anchorage, Alaska, originally from Syracuse, New York. My husband's in the military, so that's what brought us up here to Alaska. And I run my business full time at this point. I'm a dietitian for runners, and I also help individuals with disordered eating and eating disorders, which is a passion of mine. So I just love what I do. I'm super excited to be like full-time entrepreneur now. So that is an update since the last time we got on this Healthy Runner podcast. But yeah, that's the spiel, the elevator pitch.
Whoop, whoop. That is amazing. Yeah, I am so excited for you. You've been doing some amazing work with our clients in our program, and I'm just so happy for you, and look forward to seeing where this journey really takes you. And yeah, this weekend was there was a bunch of athletes that you actually helped that were in our coaching program that had our big kind of local race. So for those of you that don't know, most of our coaching team is in the state of Connecticut. That's where we kind of originated from. Most of the clients actually in our coaching program are actually outside of Connecticut, but we do have a kind of a small pocket within Connecticut. So we had our local spring kind of half marathon here yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday. Yeah. Wow. So much is like happened. Holy cow. So much has gone on. And it was just so gratifying to see like everything come together, because I need to give these guys a shout out on the podcast, because like they trained, they committed, like all of these people hopped in our group in literally the months of November, December, even before the new year. And they said, I am ready to invest in my health, and my running. Either I'm going to get over a stubborn pain, or I'm going to get over a stubborn sticking point with my training, dial down my nutrition, right? And they trained in Connecticut, the coldest part of the year, the hardest months to train in. So I just was on cloud nine yesterday. I didn't run the race myself. For those that have listened to previous episodes, you might have heard me talk about running the Cheshire half marathon in my local hometown here in Connecticut, but I didn't run myself. I was just there to support the athletes. We had our table set up. We had a fun day. Coach Latoya and I were holding down the Spark tent. So we had a fun day, and it was just amazing to see, some people like, Heather, who's in our program, ran a strong and fast 5K. Allie, who actually edits the podcast, she's been on the show for the 100th episode. If you listen to that one, she just started running 3 months ago and ran her first 5K. She's a dancer, so she dances professionally and just started running. And this was something that was very exciting to see Allie crush, her first 5K and do it for herself. Chris in our program got a half marathon PR, and he's looking really strong for his marathon in Vermont coming up. Francisco, who is relatively new to running, in his 50s, is exponentially crushing his running fitness, working with Coach Lou, finished third in his age group for this half marathon. And he's going to crush his first marathon in Providence in a couple of weeks. Kate is another one that Kate is, she's in her young 20s and new to running. She's a nurse. She just graduated school. She's, going to nurse practitioner school right now. And she was told by a doctor to basically never run again, that running was bad for her. And I'm just so proud of her as I kind of reflected on this yesterday, that, here's someone who's young, who really enjoys running, was told essentially never run for the rest of your life. And really, when in fact that wasn't necessarily true. And, we were able to help her overcome her pain and then train for her first half marathon. And she did amazing. And, just being able to get someone back to being able to do something they love, and also provide them such a great outlet like running that they can utilize for their future, right? As Brooke, as you start your life, you get married, right? You're working, you're an entrepreneur full time. We have stressors, we need to be able to run some of that stuff off,
Yes.
So this was pretty cool. And then Rob, if you remember, our firefighter guy, he's been juggling a crazy schedule, and he finished his first half marathon in over 7 years. I think the longest run he did in the last 7 years was a 6 miler, and he was able to run the half marathon. So super proud of these guys. And how can I forget Kathleen? Loved it. Shaved time off her last half marathon, got some redemption in Cheshire. So go Kathleen. We're so proud of you. So it was a great day overall. It was a very, very rewarding day to see all these athletes who worked hard over the winter. And thank you for all of the guidance that you helped provide them along their way in fueling for their runs.
Yeah, I hope they all had their fuel yesterday.
Yes, they did. They did. They had the fuel dialed down. And thank you, everyone who is watching this on the Facebook Live. I see you guys here. Gina, Roger, Coach Kat, Jonna, Alexis. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you have any questions for Brooke at all, drop them in the comment box and she'll be happy to answer them. But let's get into today's kind of nutrition 101 for runners. So first question I have for you, Brooke, is really, I hear about this whole macro thing, and it seems to be kind of trendy, macros. What's the difference between macronutrients and micronutrients?
Yes. So macronutrients are, I want you to think of the big three. So macronutrients are what is your food is primarily composed of that gives us energy. So those are things like carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And then you have the micronutrients, which is literally everything else, all of the vitamins, all of the minerals like iron, vitamin C, the B vitamins, all that stuff. Those are considered micronutrients. So the macronutrients are what is composed of the energy. So the calories, that's what protein, carbs, and fat are. And the micronutrients don't necessarily provide us caloric energy, but they can contribute to energy as your body is working efficiently and properly. If you're low on things like B vitamins or iron, you might feel fatigued, but taking an iron supplement or a vitamin B12 supplement isn't necessarily going to give you calories, but it's going to help energy systems out, which will then in turn give you more energy. So macronutrients, the big three: carbs, protein, fat. Micronutrients is everything else, which I do find that lots of people tend to get really caught up in like the nitty-gritties of the micronutrients. So before we even worry about the micronutrients, we're looking at the macronutrients first, which is the calories.
All right. So focus on the foundation first.
Yes.
If the foundation of your house is not sound and strong, there's no really need to focus on the little nitty-gritty details.
Exactly. And I always talk about that, like building your nutrition house. That foundation is, of course, the basic knowledge of nutrition. So just understanding like the very basics, which is what we're going to talk about today. And then working your way up the house, so to speak, or the ladder, and getting into the more nitty gritty, like fun things like supplements and that kind of stuff. But without the foundation, you can't move up the house or move up the ladder.
I love it. Yeah. It's like how I think about from a physical standpoint, like my 5 tips for strong and healthy running. If you don't have those components and you're not strengthening, your run specific muscles, you're not training on one leg, you're not adding in some jump training, you're not taking care of your soft tissues, you can find the coolest, latest, greatest exercise out there on YouTube or social media. But if you don't have that foundational strength to do it, it's really not going to move the needle in your running performance. So I kind of look at that from like the physical standpoint. That makes sense to me. So yeah, let's get into those macronutrients. And, can you just describe what are the components, or you kind of said carbs, proteins, and fats, right? Are kind of those main components in the foods that we eat. So let's start with the first one there, carbs. So, what are they and what do they do for our bodies?
Yeah, so carbohydrates, like the only job of carbohydrates in our body is to give us energy. So when you think of carbs, I want you to think just pure energy. Carbohydrates get broken down into glucose in the body, and that glucose is turned into energy in the body. So it's really cool because that is like the only job of a carbohydrate, which is unfortunate that they're getting such a bad rep in the media lately, because they are just so important for athletes and endurance athletes specifically, because we're using so much more of that energy on our runs, on those long runs, day to day. So carbohydrates equal energy. And when we talk about carbohydrates, I'm talking about things like breads, pastas, rices, starchy vegetables, fruits, and dairy products. Like all of that those have carbohydrates. And the last piece of this as well is that half of your diet, like at least half of your diet, should be coming from carbohydrates. So when I hear about runners that are going like low carb or no carb, it breaks my heart, because you're really missing out on just such key energy components for your body and for your performance. So we definitely don't want to skimp out on the carbs, because they are going to provide us with the most energy, and your body is going to be using that energy most efficiently as well.
All right. Thank you for that, because actually my wife just asked me that the other day. Tell you the truth is because I think people have it. I don't know, I might be judging here, but I think people have a tendency to share like what worked for them. And if they do something drastic in their nutrition, you tell me if I'm wrong here. If they do something drastic in their nutrition and they basically wind up doing fill in the blank, any diet, right? And they wind up losing a lot of weight, they kind of, the correlation turns in their minds causation, right? Yes. And they think that it was that specific diet that had them lose weight, when in fact, it was literally that they wound up sticking to a regimented plan and ate less calories. Is that correct?
Yes, 100%. Okay. And the other thing with carbs too, this is important, like with keto specifically and low carb specifically, is that carbohydrates hang on to water in the body. So when somebody goes keto and they essentially like throw out all the carbs, that initial weight loss is primarily water weight, because like I said, the carbohydrates hold on to water in the body. So that's where that big drop in weight comes from, is primarily from water, which is not a bad thing, or no, it's not a bad thing to have that water from the carbohydrates in your body. So That's just the correlation that you might find with the scale. Like if it goes down like immediately after you drop out carbs, it's not necessarily fat loss. It's more of water loss.
Hmm. I see. I see. Okay. So then sticking with the theme of carbs, which or what types of carbs should runners be consuming? If, you're telling us carbs are not bad, like they're not the enemy, like whatever social media influencer you're following, they're not bad. So what carbs would be the best for us as runners?
Love that question. So any and all carbs are great. However, I will distinguish the difference between like a complex carb and a simple carb and how they play a role in the runner's body. So complex carbohydrates are things that have fiber with them. So these are things like whole wheat breads, your fruits, your veggies, your starchy veggies, whole grains as a whole. So quinoa, brown rice, those kinds of things. Those are considered complex carbs because they have fiber in them. And what that fiber does is it slows down digestion of the carbohydrates. So you don't get necessarily a bigger increase in blood sugar spikes. So it levels out that blood sugar spike and it keeps you fuller for longer because it takes longer to digest. So those are the complex carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates are things like white breads, white pastas, white rices. Some fruits are pretty low in fiber, so those can be considered a simple carb. Pretzels, crackers, those kinds of things, they have very little fiber, and they give us a quick spike in blood sugar, which is our body uses as immediate energy. So for runners specifically and athletes specifically, we want to have a simple carbohydrate like right before we go out and do an endurance activity, because our body is going to be using that like right away for energy. So we don't want something that's like longer digesting. It's going to get stuck in our stomach. It's going to give us cramps. Our body's not going to be using it as efficiently. So something like a simple carbohydrate right before you're going out and doing your activity is super helpful for your body to use right away.
Yeah, so I'm sure many people who are listening to this are wondering, what do you recommend, or what are some examples of those simple carbohydrates that runners can have right before they go out for their long run or to take before their races?
Yeah. So like right before a run, I am one to do like pretzels right before I run, a handful of pretzels. I also want to do like a banana. A lot of runners have no problem digesting bananas right before a run and no GI upset. So those things are great. Even a gel, like an energy gel, those are great right before a run, just simple, quick carbs to go right in your body. And right now, my ultimate go-to is the Nature's Bakery fig bars, not brand associated at all. But those things are like so good right before a run. And I do think they have a little bit of fiber, but they don't bother me at all. And I know lots of other people love those as well. The other thing that's really hot right now is like applesauce pouches, which is kind of funny. Like the little go-go squeezes that you give to your toddler. Runners love those too for right before a run.
Yes, and shout out to our client Katie if she ever listens to this, because I know that's her go-to. She steals her kids' applesauce pouches, and I think that's great. And yeah, bananas I think are definitely one of those go-tos. I've been doing the medjool dates that have been working out really well with some of my UCAN like almond butter on top. I have like 2 of those before my run and strength training, like I did this morning, or sometimes before a long run, or I will do maybe oatmeal and banana like 2 hours before my long run, and probably like 2.5 hours for my races. And I know many runners do that as well. So we want simple carbs. We don't want high fibery foods. We mentioned bananas is good fruit. Any other fruits? Like all the others pretty much have a good amount of fiber in it, right?
Yeah, and also it's like the type of carbohydrate that's in the fruit. So things that are really high in fructose for some people can like wreak havoc on the gut. So, if you're having a piece of fruit like an apple, for example, right before, and you're like, gosh, that really doesn't do me well at all. It's because apples have pretty high fructose. So low fructose fruits are bananas and grapes. So those things are a little bit easier on the gut if you find that your gut is a little bit sensitive. So hopefully that helps as well.
Yeah. And does fructose cause a little spike in blood sugar levels and like the insulin response and all that stuff to
So
occur? That's like good post exercise, like strength training or running?
So all carbs cause that spike in blood sugar. And honestly, every single body is different in the way that they react to certain carbs and certain foods. So can't give a blanket, like there's a lot of things in the GI index out there, which is like, there's a lot of nuance with that. So just be careful with information like that. Specifically, just know that everybody's body is different.
Yeah. And so for those that don't know, what is the GI index?
The glycemic index. So it just is how fast a certain food will raise your blood sugar, which is based on 100 grams of the food. So 100 grams of, a piece of fruit is different than 100 grams of a different piece of fruit. So just, again, it's a little bit nuanced with the information that's out there, and it's very detailed. So it's easy to get like information overwhelmed when you're looking at something like that, and following advice specifically from the glycemic index.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted you to clarify that in case people weren't familiar with that. And there are certain foods that have been classified as kind of high glycemic and low glycemic, and which ones are bad and good. You'll see those labels being placed
Totally.
A lot. So thank you for clarifying that. All right. And I think that pretty much covers like the basics of carbs, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Carbs are the most like intricate ones. So.
Okay. All right. So carbs are not bad, guys, especially. And I just need to reiterate that because I think there are many runners who maybe start running or enjoy the benefits of running for perhaps weight loss. And it has been so much in the media the last, 10 years, I would say, that, carbs are like the enemy and they're like the worst thing ever. And I think we need to think about this, as Brooke is saying, from an athlete standpoint, and, you as a runner and what you need to do to be able to perform at your best. And if you can't perform at your best, then you're not going to actually, number one, hit your running goals. And number two, be able to even, put out that effort or run how you want to maybe actually burn calories exercising for weight loss, right?
Yeah. Yep, 100%. And, the biggest thing I tell athletes is like, let's make sure you're well fueled first before we even talk about like any of that other stuff, because a well fueled runner is a healthy runner, is a strong runner.
Oh, love that. Well fueled, healthy runner, strong runner. Okay. So let's go on to protein. So what are the different types of protein out there, or, what is protein doing for us as runners?
Yeah. So protein is your body's building blocks. So when you think of protein, I want you to think, okay, building things up, keeping things strong, putting things together. Protein is responsible for helping you repair your muscles, build your muscles back up from exercise. When we get all those little micro tears from exercise, protein helps your cells rebuild and your tissues rebuild and repair. So proteins get broken down as amino acids in the body, and those amino acids is what does all of those functional physiological processes that I just mentioned, and as well as helps you fight infection. And I think the really important thing to talk about with protein that is a misnomer out there is that your body is only going to use what it needs. So if you have like an excess of protein in your body, you're not going to become Hulk overnight. You're just going to store it as energy. So your body just stores it as energy. It uses what it needs. And it's like, okay, we're good. We're going to store the rest as energy for later on. On the other hand, if you are only eating protein and you're not providing your body with enough carbs, protein is going to be used as energy first and then building blocks second. So that's really important to distinguish too. And this is why it's like balanced nutrition is so important, and to understand like what each process does in your body. So protein equals building blocks and repair.
So as you were saying that, I'm thinking about, it's almost like if you are limiting your carbs and you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? Because then you're using your protein to, use for energy. But if your goal is to actually get stronger as a runner, which if you're listening to this podcast, that's most likely your goal, right? Is to get stronger, stay healthy, not get injured, lifelong running. And if you're not having the proper carbs, then the protein that you're eating is going toward energy. And then it's not there to actually rebuild your muscles to get stronger.
Totally.
So, all right. That makes sense. And then what are some examples of foods, that runners can have, or would be good for runners to have as protein sources?
So plant versus meat, or plant versus animal, doesn't matter. Whatever you prefer, whatever you like, there is no like benefit one or the other. It's totally based on your preference. So if you're going for the animal-based products, your proteins are going to be anything like beef, fish, chicken, game meat. That's like really big up here in Alaska, so I started to mention that. Eggs, things like Greek yogurt, those are all wonderful sources of protein for animal-based protein products. Now, if we go on to the more plant-based side, which I know we've got a lot of plant-based runners, I work with a lot of plant-based runners. So I've had to get really creative in thinking of different ways for you guys to get protein in. So things like beans, lentils, tofu, any soy product, seitan, which is a wheat protein, nuts, hemp hearts, nutritional yeast, quinoa, those sorts of things are all great plant-based proteins.
All right. Thank you. And the best time to consume protein would be when?
So evenly throughout the day. Timing, I would say, make sure you just get some at breakfast, lunch, dinner. Even better if you can get some with your snacks as well. So whenever you're building up your meals, I always we'll talk about this later on, but think about, okay, where's my protein in this meal or this snack? Just to make sure that you're getting plenty throughout the day. Because again, your body is only going to use what you give it, and what it needs. So make sure that you get plenty throughout the day and you'll be good to go.
All right. So that was carbs and protein. So we covered two buckets. The third bucket you said was fats.
Yes.
So yeah, I think fats also possibly we may try to limit. So what fats are healthy for runners to consume?
Yes. So fats provide us again with energy. They help us insulate and protect our body. And the most important regulator of fat is that as a hormone regulator. So if you are not consuming enough fats, your hormones are not going to be running efficiently, no pun intended. And things like our sex functions are going to go first if your fats are not up to par. Even overall intake is up to par, because it's not a necessary function of the body, right? So if you feel like, gosh, I'm really dragging, I've lost my menstrual cycle, maybe your sex drive is really low, that could be an indicator that you're just not getting enough overall energy and or not enough fats in your body and your diet. So ways you can get fats from your diet are things like fatty fishes, oils, nuts, seeds, avocados, and dairy again.
All right. And is there a recommended like percentage of a diet or meal or like, I don't know, daily intake you recommend?
So a range would be between 25 and 35% of your diet should be coming from fats. And I like to give that range because again, everybody is so different and individual, but for most people, they land within that range.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And those are some, yeah. So you want to basically stay away from like the saturated fats, right? And the fried foods and all of those, right? Those wouldn't be the best in terms of like running performance and or recovery from running. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely room in your diet for anything that you want, but those things are probably going to make you feel a little bit run down, like especially the fried foods. But again, it's all about, okay, what do you want in that moment? So the recommended amount is less than 10% of your diet should be coming from saturated fats.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And I would say, just add to that, that you definitely don't want to consume, those saturated fats or fried foods the night before your race, as we kind of spoke about last week's episode with Coach Whitney. So excellent. So that's kind of the basics. Anything else that you want to add to that in terms of like running nutrition basics?
No, I don't think so. I think that really does cover like the house, like the foundation of the house. So that's my spiel on those.
Awesome. So that's really what we pretty much covered here today, runners. We wanted to keep this very like pinpoint specific focus topic of really that foundation of the house or the running nutrition. We talked about the differences between micro and macronutrients, those three components of macronutrients that you need to be focusing on as a runner: your carbs, your proteins, your fats. We talked about what carbs may be best at different times and the difference between complex and simple carbs. And then also, where proteins and fats fit into the picture for fueling as runners. So, if someone wanted to kind of learn some more information regarding nutrition for runners, where would be a good spot for them to connect with you, Brooke?
Yeah, so I'm very active over on Instagram. So if you guys want to follow me over on Instagram at Intentful Nutrition, that is the best way to find me. And then I do have a nutrition course for runners as well, if you want to learn a little bit more about the nuances of the basis of nutrition and everything else, like pre, during, and post workout fuel. So I cover all of that in my nutrition course for runners as well.
Awesome. And then, yeah, you can also, if you guys are not in the Healthy Runner Facebook group community, Brooke is in there sharing weekly content as well. So make sure you join our Facebook community and you can get that weekly content as well. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on for the third time as the charm. This was so informative. And I think, sometimes this might've been a little basic for some of you, but I think it's always a good reminder, because you're right. Like, we get caught up in the weeds sometimes of like the nitty gritty vitamins, minerals, this, that, supplements. And, we really don't focus on the house and the foundation.
Totally.
So thank you for providing this reminder. And, if you guys are watching the video version of this, let us know what you found most helpful. Drop it in the comments below, just so we know kind of what to keep producing in terms of content to help keep you healthy as a runner.
Thank you so much, Dwayne.
Brooke, yeah, it was great seeing you as always. And we will be in touch soon. Remember, guys, every week we go live within our Healthy Runner Facebook group. So check out our events tab to see what we're going to be covering next week on the podcast. And thank you so much for listening. If you're listening to this during a run, keep crushing your run out there. Let's stay active, let's stay healthy, and let's just keep on running. Bye, guys.
See ya.